Welcome to Vices and Volumes, the podcast that brings forgotten stories from the 1800s back to life. I'm Avril, and each episode I dive into my collection of old books, manuscripts and journals to uncover the fascinating tales, beliefs and characteristics that shaped our past. From forgotten ghost stories to social customs, from scientific curiosities to supernatural folklore. If it's tucked away in these pages of history, I'm going to find them and I'm going to share them with you. Today I'm exploring the book that started this entire journey, Thoughts on Hunting by Peter Beckford, first published in 1787. This isn't just a hunting manual, but a window into an 18th century gentleman who transformed practical instruction into literary art. From kennel design to hound psychology, Beckford elevated every aspect of his passion into an elegant prose peppered with classical quotations. Today, we'll discover why this scholarly sportsman's work has remained in continuous print for over 240 years. This is the one that started it all. This is the book that inspired the podcast. As you know, I am no historian, and my research on these books is light and possibly questionable. Books in general have a draw for me, but I'm not a collector. I haven't read much of the classics. I don't study literature in any of its traditional forms. I simply get a kick out of the lyrical writing of the past, and I love the moment in time that the words come from. For years, I've entertained this little pleasure by popping into vintage bookshops, and I suppose you could call it aggressively browsing. I'd flick through books on anything, non-fiction, speeches from Parliament, household management, and pursuits that only the privileged could indulge in. This brought me to West Coast Rare Books in Westport, County Mayo, where I was reading a passage from books like Practical Yachting and The Grasses of Wiltshire, and greatly amused by the practical instructions where one must and every man should have in his possession, etc. While I was wandering through the different centuries, 6 women came into the store, and from what I could gather, they were all American tourists whose coach tour had stopped off in Westport for food, drink, and a little retail therapy. These women were on a roll. They were snapping up vintage volumes at a rapid rate, and their energy was contagious. One of the ladies, a dark-haired woman with enviable high cheekbones, spotted me with a large leather-bound book in my arms. I was smiling and reading the passages, and she swooped in asking me what it was. Now, my protective instincts did kick in, and I didn't necessarily want to buy it, but I also didn't want to let it go. My response was, it's a hunting book and I'm thinking of buying it. So she was curious of why I was smiling and reading. And I said, I just love how it's phrased, so polite, and how it's explaining dogs pooping. And I read out loud, if your hounds be not walked out, they should be turned into the grass court to empty themselves. After they've been fed, it will contribute not a little to the cleanliness of the kennel. Well, I'd no idea what I'd just started. I was handed books from all angles asking me to read what these ladies had picked up. Even the lady who owned the shop said, I would never have thought of even reading it like that. You gave it life. So I was still clinging to my large leather-bound book all this time and fearing that if I did not secure it at some point, it would be snatched from my arms. Even though I wasn't sure if I wanted it, I bought it anyway, with little regard for the price, the content, the condition, or even why I was buying it, to be honest. As I packed up and resumed my browsing, the Americans began to leave the shop, one by one, and heavily loaded with old books. I waved goodbye to Miss Enviable Cheekbones, and in the doorway she turned back and said to me, you should do a podcast on old books. So, here I am, bringing you Thoughts on Hunting by Peter Beckford. This edition is the deluxe edition. It's from 1911, and there were only 300 copies of this one made. The one I clung to is the 172nd copy, signed by the artist G. Denholm Armour. Sadly, though, all the colour plates have been removed, and there's none of what I believe to be the beautiful art in mine. Thoughts on Hunting, though, was published in 1781, and it's remained in continuous print for 240 years. Despite the mutilation, the copy that I have is in good condition. The ex libris tells me it was owned by Raymond Swinburne Butler of Somerset in England, and it was well read and well used. Some of the pages are dog-eared and are marked from so much use. The beautiful leather cover is well worn, but it wasn't until the sun cut the book yesterday morning in my kitchen that I noticed the top of the pages are gold, whereas the rest are deckled edge. It's a gorgeous piece to have, and you can clearly see why it caught my eye. Before I begin, though, I do ask the listener to take into account The practices and attitudes described are not related to me or my opinions at all. They are considered normal with that era, though they certainly wouldn't align with today's standards. I'm taking the book at face value and for what it is, a beautifully written book by a person who was passionate and dedicated to improve the sport that he clearly loved. It's not my intention to judge historical practices, but rather to explore them within their proper context. And I'm not here to offend, but to share, so I've done my best to understand Beckford's terminology, fox hunting practices, and all manner of methods covered in the text. Interestingly, the first edition was printed anonymously, and we may never have known who wrote this if it wasn't for a disgruntled reader who criticised Beckford's work in the monthly review. The critic was suspected to be a clergyman through some of the things he said in his commentary, and his criticisms were scathing. He commented on Beckford's methods and accused him that he was being cruel to the hounds. Beckford, however, noticed that the critic did not know much about the topic, and he'd also made some strange conclusions and assumptions that were simply incorrect that came from ignorance on the topic. Not dissimilar from the comment sections in most social platforms today. Following this, Beckford's defensive instincts took hold and he got stuck into writing the revised and expanded edition, to which he put his name to and directly answered the critic throughout the text and footnotes. This was my favourite. The same author who I quoted in my 10th letter, who tells us how we should not eat a hare, is also kind enough to tell us when we should eat a fox. I wish he'd also added the best manner of dressing him. We are obliged to him, however, for the following information. Here he actually quotes in French, which I'm not going to attempt, but I will give you the translation. The flesh of the fox is not so bad as that of a wolf. Dogs and even human beings eat it in autumn, particularly when it's been fed and fattened on grapes. You would have been better pleased, I make no doubt, if the learned gentleman had instructed us how to hunt him rather than when to eat him. Beckford goes on then to show up the critic by teasing him in lack of understanding. I shall end this letter with an anecdote of the late Huntsman of mine, whom was a great slip-slop, and always called successfully. One day when he had been out with the young hounds, I sent for him and asked what sport he had and how the hounds behaved. Very good sport, sir, and no hounds could have behaved any better. Did you run him long? They ran him, and please your honour, upwards of 3 hours successfully. So did you kill him? Oh no, sir, we lost him at last. The critic was offended that there was no name to the sportsman's work, despite there also being no name to his response in the monthly review. However, he did try to work out who the writer might be, commenting that it was unusual for someone who was involved in hunting that could also be so articulate in their writing. There appears to be little affinity and correspondence between the hunting and literature upon the general comparison of the profession of each, and a dyadic treatise on the art of hunting was rather unexpected acquisition, and still more so to find the precepts delivered in an easy and agreeable style. The work before us does not come from a keen sportsman, but from a man of letters. A coincidence, the less to be wondered, as if we were justified in conjecturing his profession from some hints that it may have escaped his pen. The critic was not wrong in his observations. For the most part, those involved in the day-to-day of the kennels were not educated enough to write a coherent letter, never mind a full tryst on hunting, and even before Beckford point this out in his footnote on page 3, it may be objected that hunting a pack of hounds depends upon the huntsman, and the huntsman, generally speaking, is an illiterate fellow, whom seldom can either read nor write, and cannot well be denied. I must therefore observe that it is impossible for the business of a kennel to go on as ought unless the master himself knows something about it. There must be an understanding somewhere, and without it no gentleman can enjoy in perfection this noble diversion. Beckford was highly educated. He went to Westminster School and later Oxford University. He was a genuine scholar with an extensive knowledge of classical literature. The retrospective review captures Beckford's multiple talents perfectly in this quote. Never had a fox or hare the honour of being chased to death by so an accomplished hunter. Never was a huntsman's dinner graced by such urbanity and wit. He would bag a fox in Greek, find a hare in Latin, inspect his kennels in Italian, and direct the economy of his stables in exquisite French. His appetite for language and classical literature is evident throughout the peppering of quotes in varied languages throughout the text. However, the most quoted and seemingly revered author that Beckford repeatedly referenced is William Somerville. Somerville was an English poet of the early 1700s whose masterpiece, The Chase, of 1735 became the first major poem devoted entirely to hunting. Somerville elevated hunting from a mere sport to a literary art, treating it as a noble pursuit and weaving practical experience into a classical poetic style. Beckford clearly admired Somerville for giving hunting a true literary dignity. Beckford's own writings reflect that his want, you could almost say desire, to emulate Somerville's work, but he was torn away from the verse by the need to write an instructional manual. The clashes of desires resulted in a fabulous literary work that is very unique and makes a potentially stale topic into a pleasure to read. He alludes to his conflict in the opening lines of his very first letter. Knowing your partiality to rhyme, I wish I could send my thoughts in verse, but this would take up more time without answering your purpose better. I must beg you to accept them in humble prose, which, in my opinion, is better suited to the subject. Dyadic essays should be a little clogged as possible. They should proceed regularly and clearly, should be easily written and easily understood, having less to do with words than things. The game of crambo is out of fashion. To no small prejudice the rhyming tribe, and before I could find a rhyme to porringer, I should hope to finish a great part of these letters. I shall therefore without further delay proceed upon them. This is, however, I must desire to be the first understood between us, that when, to save the trouble for us both, I say a thing is, without tacking a salvo to the tail of it, such as, in my opinion, to the best of my judgment, etc., etc., you shall not call my humility into question, as the assertion is not meant to be mathematically certain. When I have any better authority than my own, such as Somerville, for instance, who, by the by, is the only one who's written intelligibly on the subject, I shall take the liberty of giving it you in his own words to save you the trouble of turning to him. Here he is mentioned, you shall not call my humility into question. This statement here I've seen in other books written by the highly enthusiastic involved hobbyist. They have tempered expectations of the reader, prepared for the trolls, as we all have to do. He has reminded us of the risk of claiming to be an expert and to take his advice lightly, as we would with every video on TikTok. I shall think of myself as sufficiently justified in recommending such as have been tried with success in other countries where I have generally hunted. As almost every country has a different dialect, you will also excuse, I hope, any terms that may not be current with you. I will take the best of care I can, and the number shall be small. It is needless to think to advise you to adopt too easily the opinions of other men. You will hear a tall man say, it is a folly to ride anything but large horses, and every little man in company will immediately sell his little horses. By such he can hardly mount, and ride them in hilly countries for which they are totally unfit. Pride induces some men to dictate. Indolence makes others likely to be dictated to. So both parties find their account in it. You will not let this mislead you. You will dare to think for yourself, nor will you believe every man who pretends to know what you like better than you do yourself. There is a degree of coxcombry, I believe, in everything. You have heard, I make no doubt, that every greyhound is either black or white, or black and white. And if you've any faith in those who say they know best, they will tell you that there are no others. Prejudice, however, is by far too blind a guide to be depended on. What sound advice! I think we should all take that paragraph and tack it to the wall. Beckford's knowledge mostly is obtained by study, observation, spending hours amongst the hounds, and indeed time managing his staff. There was a rigid class hierarchy in the 1700s where gentlemen were expected to command complete authority over their servants while maintaining detailed knowledge of every aspect of their work. Throughout his letters we get glimpses of this command and authority. There could be no harm in you knowing what your servants ought to do, as it is not impossible, but may be sometimes necessary for you to see that it is done. In your military profession you are perfectly acquainted with the duty of a common soldier, and though you have no further business with the minutiae of it, with no doubt you still find the knowledge of them useful to you. Believe me, they may be useful here, and you will pardon me, I hope, if you wish to see a martinet in the kennel as well as in the field. Orders given without skill are seldom well obeyed, and where the master is either ignorant or inattentive, the servant will be idle. The clear division of labour and correct assignment of duties is also vital. This not only reflects a need to direct efforts correctly, but it also shows us that ambiguity in roles can cause problems. Beckford's details on good feeders on page 19 emphasises the need for clarity. A good feeder is an essential part of your establishment. Let him be young and active, and have a reputation at least of not disliking work. He should be one who strictly obeys any orders that you may give him, and well with regard to the management as to the breeding of the hounds, and should not be solely under the direction of your huntsman. It is true I have seen it otherwise. I have known a pack of hounds belong, as it were, to entirely the huntsman, a stable of horses belonging to the groom, while the master had little more power than the direction of either than a perfect stranger. I know you choose to keep the supreme command in your own hands, and though you permit your servants to remonstrate, you may not suffer them to disobey. He who allows a huntsman to manage his hounds without control literally keeps them for the huntsman's amusement. Beckford shows us here a sensible take on the management and authority over staff, and he shows disdain for those who don't understand the vital basics of management. While it's clear that Beckford had his ears to the ground, and it's also evident that he had a good enough relationship with his people that they could bring their concerns to him. On page 139, he shows us a character reference he has asked for from someone in his employ. This is a challenge to read. He quotes it verbatim, and the punctuation is missing and spelling a challenge. However, I will do my best here. Sir, yours I received the 24th of this present instant June, and at your request I will give you an impartial account of my man John G.'s character. He is a shoemaker or cordwainer, which you please to call by trade, and now in our town he was following the carding business for everyone that wants him. He served his time at a town called Bridgestock in Northamptonshire, and from there in Great Addington journeyman to this occupation as before mentioned, and used to come to my house, and found by riding my horses to water that he rode his horse pretty well, which was not at all mistaken, for he rides a horse pretty well, he looks after a kennel of hounds very well, and finds a hare very well. He hath no judgment in hunting a pack of hounds. So we're getting a good impression of this man. As you can see here, he seems okay. But things start to go a little downhill from here for Mr. G. Now, though he rides well, he don't with discretion, for he don't know how to make the most of a horse, but a very hairy, starey fellow will ride over a church, if in his way, though may prevent the leap by having a gap within 10 yards of him. And if you are not in the field with him yourself when you are hunting to tutor him about riding, he will kill all your horses you have in the stable in 1 month, for he hath killed downright and lamed so that will never be fit to use no more than 5 horses since he hath hunted my hounds, which was 2 years and upwards. He can talk no dog language to a hound. He hath no voice, speaks to a hound just as if his head were in a drum, nor neither does he know how to draw a hound when they are at loss, no more than a child of 2 years old. You could work on his riding, we could work on his hound voice. It's not so bad. However, this is where our letter writer seems to get really stuck in and into a bit of a flow. As to his honesty, I have always found him honest till about a week ago, and I have found him dishonest now. For about a week ago, I sent my servant that I have now to fetch some sheep from Mr. Stangeon of Higham Ferrers, where G used to go for feet, and I always sent my money by my man that brings the feet. And Stangeon told my man that I have now that I owed him money for feet, and when the boy came home, he told me, and I went to Stangeon, and when I found the truth of the matter, G had kept my money in his hands and had never paid Stangeon. He had been along with me once for a letter in order for his character to give him one, but I told him I could not give him one. So I would not write at all. So he's clocked up a couple of things now. So can't write, has no voice, and is dishonest. But it gets worse. G is a very great drunkard. Can't keep a penny in his pocket. A sad, notorious liar. If you send him upon an errand, a mile or two from Uppingham, he will get drunk, stay all day, and never come home while in the middle of the night, or such a time as he knows his master is in bed. He can nor will not keep a secret, neither hath he so much wit as other people, for the fellow is half a fool. For if he would have business done with an expedition, if he once gets out of the town or sight of you, you shall see him no more, while the next morning he serves me so, and so you must expect the same if you hire him. I use you just as I would be used myself if I desired a character of you, of a servant that I had designed to hire for yours, as to let you know the truth of everything about him. I am, sir, your most humble servant to command. and the signature here is missing. However, he continues. P.S. He takes good care of his horses with good looking after him, and as to the dressing him. But if you don't take care, he will fill the manger full of corn so that he will collie the horses and ruin the whole stable of horses. Great Addington, June the 28th, 1734. I'd say by the end of this, Beckford was glad that he'd asked for the recommendation. What I found quite funny about this letter is that it starts off okay and then it slowly deteriorates into a careless rider, a voiceless man, dishonest, a thief, a drunk, a killer of horses. What I also love here is we often see the letters from those who had great mastery of the English language, those who were really educated. However, this one illustrates the difference in the level of education, the literacy, the classes. And the letter is more of a running commentary of thought rather than a carefully planned story that you would normally see. He valued loyal and savvy employees. He also had discovered some of the ideal qualities that are desirable in those in charge of hounds. It's hard to understand the roles that the huntsman and whipper-in play when you're not familiar with hunting. Though I had a bit of a vague understanding of these roles, I decided to get into a little bit more detail, which I'm going to share with you to help you understand. The huntsman is the leader and the strategist of the hunt. They control the entire pack through voice, horn, and presence, making all the key decisions about where to hunt, when to cast the hounds, and how to pursue the fox. The huntsman must be an expert in fox behaviour, scent conditions, and hound psychology, knowing each individual hound's characteristics. They're essentially the commanding officer who reads the terrain, weather, and situation to determine the hunting strategy. The whipper-in, then, serves as the huntsman's tactical assistant. He rides around the outside of the pack, keeping them together and preventing them from chasing down the wrong scent, and ensuring that none of them get left behind. The whipper-in must be an exceptional rider who can quickly position themselves wherever needed, supporting the huntsman, keeping the pack in check. Think of them as the sergeant who executes the commanding officer's orders and maintains the discipline within the ranks. The whipper-in will have trained the hounds to respond to the sound of the whip, a loud crack being more effective to snap their attention back. Don't mistake the whip as a cruel device. It's designed to tap and reach where the human body cannot stretch to. So now that we have an understanding, Beckford's detailed description of their character and skill seems all the more important. He writes on this on letter 9, page 59. I will endeavour to describe what a good huntsman should be. He should be young, strong, active, bold, and enterprising, fond of the diversion and indefatigable in the pursuit of it. He should be sensible and good-tempered. He ought to also be sober. He should be exact, civil, and cleanly, should be a good horseman and a good groom. His voice should be strong and clear, and he should have an eye so quick as to perceive which of his hounds carries the scent and when all are running. He should also have an excellent ear, and always to distinguish the foremost hounds when he does not see them. He should be quiet, patient, without conceit. Such are the excellencies which constitute a good huntsman. He should not, however, be too fond of displaying them till necessity calls them forth, and he should let his hounds alone whilst they carry a hunt, and should have the genius to assist them when they cannot. Beckford goes on to suggest similar characteristics of the whipper-in. However, a key requirement is being light and an exceptional horseman. These should be able to work well as a team and feel that they can communicate and operate without pulling rank at any stage. With regards to the whipper-in, as you keep 2 of them, and no pack of foxhounds is complete without, the first may be considered as the second huntsman and should have nearly the same good qualities. I had one formerly who insisted on stopping the hounds as he ought, would try to kill a fox by himself. This fault is unpardonable. He should always maintain to the huntsman's halloo, and stop such hounds as they divide from it. When stopped, he should get forward with them after the huntsman. He must always be contented to act an underpart, except when circumstances may require that he should act otherwise. And the moment they cease, he must not fail to resume his former station. We pay him for what diverts him, and he is enriched by the greatest pleasure. Nor is a general, after a victory, more proud of his huntsman who returns with his fox's head. Field money was a pay that the huntsman received for a successful hunt ending in the kill of a fox. Think of it as a sales commission or a bonus. The huntsman took great pride in bringing home a fox's head, and being paid for that privilege was of great importance. I have heard of a certain duke who allowed no veils to his servants. asked his huntsman what generally made of his field money and gave him what he asked instead of it. He went on very well for some time, till at last the huntsman desired an audience. "Your Grace," said he, "it is very generous, and gives me more than ever I got for my field money in my life. Yet I come to beg a favour of your Grace, that you would let me take field money again, for I have not half the pleasure in now killing a fox than I had before." So while the huntsman was paid predictable and generous salary, the Duke had taken away the thrill and the motivation of the bonus paid. Thoughts on Hunting has so much to offer: stories, methodologies, coaching, advice. But what has made this so engaging is Beckford's literary talent. And I want to bring you my favourite and arguably the best part of the book, where Beckford seems to be bursting with creativity. He brings us through a fictional hunt with peaks and troughs of action and excitement. Almost the whole of Letter 13 is fast-paced and an exciting chase. This is a mix of Beckford's writing and quotes from Somerville. I'll let you know when I'm switching between Beckford and Somerville, because it sounds confusing otherwise, and you won't be able to appreciate the poetry of Somerville versus the beautiful literary art of Beckford. Let us suppose we arrive at Coverside. A quote from Somerville. Delightful scene where all around is gay, men and horses, dogs, all each in smiling countenance appears. Fresh blooming health, a universal joy. Beckford. Now let your huntsman throw in his hounds, and quietly as he can, and let the 2 whippers in keep wide of him on either hand, so that a single hound may not escape them. Let them be attentive to his halloo, and be ready to encourage or rate, as that directs. He will, of course, draw up the wind, for reasons which I shall give in another place. Now, if you can keep your brother sportsmen in order, and put any discretion into them, you are in luck. They more frequently do harm than good. If it be possible, persuade those who wish to halloo the fox off to stand quiet under the cover side, and on no account to halloo him too soon. If they do, he most certainly will turn back again. Could you entice them all into the cover, your sport, in all probability, would not be the worse for it. How well the hounds spread the cover! The huntsman, you see, is quite deserted, and his horse, who so lately had a crowd at his heels, has now not one attendant left. How steadily they draw! You hear not a single hound, yet none are idle. It is not better than to be subject of continual disappointment from the eternal babbling of unsteady hounds. A quote from Somerville. See how they range, disappeared, how busily, this way and that, they cross, examining with curious nose each likely haunt. Hark! They're on the drag, I hear. Their doubtful notes, precluding to a cry, more nobly full, and swelled with every mouth. Back to Beckford. How musical their tongues, and how they get near to him, how the chorus fills. Hark, he's found! Now where are all your sorrows and your cares, ye gloomy souls? Where are your pains and aches, you complaining ones? One halloo has dispelled them all. What a crash they make! An echo seemingly takes pleasure to repeat the sound. An astonished traveller forsakes his road, lured by its melody. Listening ploughman now stops his plough, and every distant shepherd neglects his flock, and runs to see him break. What joy, what eagerness in every face! A quote from Somerville. How happy art thou, man, when throughout no more thyself all the pangs engrind thy soul, in rapture and sweet oblivion lost. Yield a short interval and cease from pain. Back to Beckford. Mark how he runs the cover, utmost limits, yet dares not venture forth. The hounds are still too near. That check is lucky. Now if our friends head him not, he'll soon be off. Hark, they halloo, by God, he's gone! Back to Somerville. Hark, what loud he shouts, re-echo through the groves, and breaks away. Shrill horns proclaim his flight. Each staggering hound strains o'er the lawns to reach the distant pack. This triumphant all in joy. Back to Beckford. Now, huntsman, get on with head hounds. Whip her in. Bring on the others after you. Keep an attentive eye on leading hounds, that should the scent fail them, you may know at least how far they brought it. Mind Galloper, how he leads them. It's difficult to distinguish it at first. They run such style, and he is foremost hound. The goodness of his nose, and less excellent than his speed. How he carries the scent. And then, when he loses it, see how eagerly he flings to recover again. There, now he's at head again. See how the top of the hedge. Now, how they mount the hill. Observe what a head they carry. And show me, if thou canst, one shuffler or skirter among them all are not like a parcel of brave fellows who, when they engage in an undertaking, determine to share the fatigue and its dangers equally among them. Back to Somerville. Far o'er the rocky hills we range, and dangerous our course. But in the brave and true courage never fails. In vain the stream in foaming eddies whirls. In vain the ditch, wide gaping, threatens death. The craggy steep, where the poor dizzy shepherds crawl with care and clings to every twig, gives us no pain, but down they sweep, and stoops the falcon bold to pounce his prey. Then up the opponent hill, by swift emotion slung, the mount aloft, so ships in winter seas now sliding sink, adown the steep wave, then tossed on high, ride the billows and defy the storm. Back to Beckford. It was the fox I saw. It came down the hill. The crowds directed me which way to look, and the sheep ran from him as he passed along. The hounds are now on the very spot. The sheep stop them not, for they dash beyond them. Now see with what eagerness they cross the plain. Galloper no longer keeps his pace. Brusher takes it. He sees how he flings for the scent, and impetuously he runs. Eager took the lead, and how he strives to keep it. Yet Victor comes up apace. He reaches him. Observe what excellent race it has been to them. It is doubtful which one will reach the cover first. How equally they run, how eagerly they strain. Now, Victor, Victor! Ah, Brusher, thou art beaten. Victor tops the hedge. See there, how they all take their strokes. The hedge cracks with their weight, and so many jump at once. Now haste the whipper in, the other side to the cover. He's right unless he head the fox. Back to Somerville. Heavens, what melodious strains! How beat the hearts, how big with tumultuous joy! The loaded gales breathe harmony, and as the tempest drives from wood to wood through every dark recess, the forest thunders and the mountains shake. Back to Beckford. Listen, the hounds have turned. They are now in two parts. The fox has been headed back, and we have changed at last. Now, my lad, mind the huntsman halloo, and stop those hounds for which he encourages. He's right. That doubtless is the hunted fox. Now they're off again. Back to Somerville. What lengths we pass. Where will the wandering chase lead us bewildered? Smooth as swallow's skim, the new sure mead, and far more swift we fly. See my brave pack, and how they head, they press, jostling in close array. The more diffuse, obliquely wheel, while from their opening mouths volleyed thunder breaks. Look back and view the strange confusion of the vale below, where sour vexation reigns. Old age laments his vigour spent. The tall, plump, brawny youth curses his cumbrous bulk, and envies now the short Pygmean race. The Holem keened with proud insulting leer. A chosen few alone the sport enjoy, nor droop beneath their pleasing toils. Back to Beckford. Ha! Check! For now a moment's patience. We press too close upon the hounds. Huntsman, stand still. And yet they want you not. How admirable they spread, how wide they cast. Is there a single hound that does not try? If there be, ne'er shall he hunt again. There, Truman is on the scent. His feathers yet still in doubtful. 'Tis right, how readily they join him. They see the wide casting hounds, how they fly forward to recover the ground they may have lost. Mind Lightning, how she dashes, and Mungo how he works. Old Frantic too, now he pushes forward. She knows as well as we the fox is sinking. Back to Somerville. Ha! Yet he flies, nor he yields to black despair. But one loose more, all the whiles in vain. Hark! Through the yon village now, rattling clamour rings. The barns, the cots, the leafless elms return the joyous sounds. Through every homestall, through every yard, his midnight walks panting forlorn he flies. Back to Beckford. Huntsman! At fault at last! How far did you bring the scent? Have the hounds made their own cast? Now make yours. You see that the sheepdog has coursed the fox. Get forward with your hounds and make a wide cast. Hark, that halloo is indeed a lucky one. If we can hold him on, we may yet recover him, for a fox is so much distressed and must stop at last. We shall see now if they will hunt as well as run, for there is but little scent, and the impeding cloud still makes that little less. How they enjoyed the scent, how busy they are, and how each in his turn prevails. Huntsman, be quiet. Whilst the scent was good, you pressed on your hounds. It was well done, and they came to check. You stood still and interrupted them not. They were afterwards at fault. You made your cast with judgment and lost no time. You now must let them hunt. With such cold scent as this, you can do no good. They must do it all themselves. Lift them now, and not a hound stoop again. Ha! A high road at such a time as this. The tenderest nosed hound can hardly own the scent. Another fault, a man at work, and then headed back the fox. Huntsman, cast not your hounds now. You see they have overrun the scent. Have little patience and let them for once try back. We now must give them time. See where they bend towards yonder furze break. I wish he may have stopped there. Mind that old hound, he dashes over the furze. I think he wins him. Now for a fresh pass. Hark, the halloo! Aye, there he goes. It's nearly over with him. The hounds have caught view. He must have died. We'll hardly reach the cover. See how they gain upon him at every stroke. It's admirable race, yet the cover saves him. Now be quiet, and he cannot escape us. We have the wind of the hounds, and cannot be better placed. How short he runs, and now in the very strongest part of cover. What a crash! Every hound is in. Every hound is running for him. That was a quick turn. Again another. And he is put at last at shifts. Now mischief is at his heels, and death is not far off. Ha! They stop at once, all silent, and yet the earth is open. Listen now as they are at him again. Did you hear that hound catch view? They ran over the scent. The fox had laid down behind them. Now, Reynard, look at yourself. How quick they all give their tongues. Little Dreadnought, and how he works him. The terriers too. They are all squeaking at him. How close Vengeance pursues. How terribly she presses. It's just up with him. Gods, what a crash they make. The whole wood resounds. That turn is very short. Now, aye, there they have him. Woohoo! Wow, that is an amazing piece of writing. We can tell here that Beckford really does have a skill. Each moment of that hunt you can feel as he goes through the peaks and troughs of excitement, of quiet, hold your breath moments, of pure and utter adrenaline. Once you've read this, there is no doubt that Beckford was a talented writer. There was so much I wanted to share, but there's only so much I can cover in a short podcast. As a result, you'll have to join me again in the next episode to hear more about thoughts on hunting. I'm going to bring you through some of the treatments and the ailments, some hound care, and also he gives us a little insight into some challenging times, and it really shows his compassionate nature. I'm looking forward to you joining me again for part 2, where I can bring you more of this amazing book, Thoughts on Hunting, by Peter Beckford. Until part 2, may your own pursuits be penned with half the passion that Beckford brought to his hounds. I'm Avril, and this has been Vices and Volumes. Thank you for listening.